Hey guys, tonight we're going to travel back to a time when medicine wasn't quite so sanitary. Picture this. You're in ancient Egypt, a place where crocodile dung was not just for decoration or a weird tourist attraction. No, it was being used as sunscreen. Yes, you heard me right. Sunscreen made from the droppings of an animal that's probably best kept away from your beach bag. You probably won't survive this treatment, but it was just one of many strange animal-derived remedies in ancient medicine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to hear from you about where you're tuning in from tonight and what time it is there. Drop a comment with your location. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Back in the day, ancient healers didn't have pharmaceutical companies and sleek, shiny bottles of vitamin C. They had, well, whatever was available in their environment. And animals? Oh, they were seen as a gold mine of healing potential. Ancient Egyptians, for instance, weren't shy about using crocodile dung. It was applied to the skin as a form of sunscreen. Strangely enough, they believed it could protect them from the sun's harsh rays. This ancient medicine is certainly not recommended today, but it's a reminder of how people in different times were resourceful, if not a little questionable in their methods. Historians still argue whether crocodile dung really had any health benefits. But one thing is certain. The ancient Egyptians had an extraordinary relationship with their environment, finding ways to use whatever resources they had around them. From the mummified remains of animals to the bizarre concoctions made from various body parts, animal products played a large role in ancient healing practices. Speaking of which, have you ever wondered why ancient civilizations were so obsessed with animal-based treatments? Was it because they thought these creatures held magical powers? Or did they simply not know better? Well, it's most likely a mix of both. They didn't have microscopes to study bacteria or viruses, so anything that worked, whether it was a magical belief or a strange coincidence, became part of their medical toolbox. Crocodile dung was just one example of this. On the other side of the Mediterranean, ancient Greeks also had their share of odd remedies, though they tended to rely more on the medicinal properties of plants and herbs. But let's get back to the animal products. Did you know that in ancient China, they used rhino horn as a treatment for fever? Yes, rhino horn, which was believed to have cooling properties. Not something you'll find in your medicine cabinet today, thankfully. These animal-based cures were often used because they were believed to have powerful and potent healing properties, sometimes tied to the mystical and divine. Historians are still divided on how much of this was true medicine and how much was based on superstition. But one thing is clear. Ancient people didn't have access to the synthetic medications we do today, so they had to get creative. And animal products were a huge part of that creativity. Imagine walking through the bustling streets of ancient Egypt, the air thick with the scent of spices and the warm glow of the desert sun casting shadows on the grand pyramids. Amidst all this, you might spot a healer with a jar of honey in their hand. Now, you may think of honey as something sweet to drizzle over your morning oatmeal, but back in ancient Egypt, it was a literal cure-all. They didn't just use it to sweeten their drinks. Honey was an essential part of their medical arsenal. In fact, Honey's healing powers were so revered that it became one of the first truly multi-use medicines in history. In ancient Egypt, honey wasn't just a sweet treat for the gods. It was used for everything from wound care to treating infections. The Egyptians were well aware of honey's antimicrobial properties, long before we had the science to explain why it worked. If you had a cut or wound, the Egyptians didn't just slap a bandage on it. They slathered it in honey. And no, they didn't just use any honey. This was the good stuff, carefully harvested and used in its raw form, straight from the hive. Historians still argue whether honey was truly the miracle cure it was believed to be. But there's no denying that ancient cultures were onto something. Honey has natural antibacterial properties, which made it an effective treatment for infections and wounds. In fact, modern science has recently started to rediscover the healing properties of honey, particularly in wound care, where its antimicrobial qualities can help prevent infection and promote healing. But honey wasn't just reserved for external use. Ancient Egyptians also used it in their internal medicine. They mixed honey with various herbs and plants to create concoctions aimed at curing everything from indigestion to sore throats. Some even believed that honey could help with ailments of the heart and mind, and it was often combined with wine in rituals and offerings to the gods. It's safe to say that honey played a significant role in their daily lives, both as a food and as medicine. And yet, as wondrous as honey seems, it wasn't the only magical substance the Egyptians used in their quest for health. They were known to employ other animal-derived remedies, as we'll see in a later section. But for now, honey remains one of the most iconic examples of how ancient civilizations turned what nature gave them into the building blocks of their medical practices. Historians still debate whether honey was used as a substitute for more modern antiseptics, or if it was simply seen as a natural miracle in a time of limited medical knowledge. What we do know is that honey's place in the ancient world was far beyond that of a simple food ingredient, and it laid the groundwork for the healing practices of later civilizations. Let's now journey eastward to the vast landscapes of ancient China. The air is thick with the fragrance of herbs, and the distant call of a dragon might just seem to echo in the mountains. Now, imagine yourself walking into a traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, clinic centuries ago. The shelves are lined with jars of dried animals, plants, and powders, all promising to heal whatever ails you. One remedy, however, stands out: snakes. Yes, ancient Chinese medicine practitioners used snake venom, snake bile, and even entire snakes in their treatments. While this might sound a bit extreme by modern standards, the logic behind these remedies was rooted in ancient wisdom that might just surprise you. In ancient China, the practice of medicine was deeply connected to the natural world. Chinese medicine wasn't just about curing illnesses. It was about balancing the body's energies. For thousands of years, TCM practitioners relied on a wide array of ingredients, many of them rather unusual. Snakes, for instance, were prized for their supposed healing properties. Snake bile was believed to clear heat and toxins from the body, while snake venom was used to treat various ailments, including pain and inflammation. One particularly strange treatment involved the use of live snakes in a form of snake massage, or acupuncture, where their movements were thought to stimulate circulation and relieve pain. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of snake-based remedies, in ancient Chinese medicine. While some believe these treatments were purely symbolic or based on folklore, others suggest that the venom might have had real therapeutic effects, particularly in small, controlled doses. In fact, modern science has recently started to explore the potential medicinal properties of snake venom, with some researchers investigating its use in pain management and blood pressure regulation. Could it be that ancient Chinese practitioners were onto something long before we had the tools to understand it? But it wasn't just snakes that Chinese medicine practitioners worked with. Another fascinating and somewhat frightening ingredient was the dragon. The mythical creature's body parts were often used in Chinese medicinal concoctions. Don't worry though, no real dragons were harmed in the making of these remedies. In Chinese medicine, the dragon was more of a symbolic creature, often represented by ingredients like certain minerals or animal bones, believed to hold the strength and power of the mythical beast. These ingredients were used to invigorate the body and restore its balance. Historians still debate whether the use of dragon-based remedies was a purely symbolic practice, or if these substances had actual medicinal properties. It's likely that the symbolism of dragons was more important than the actual ingredients, as the power of belief played a significant role in ancient medicine. But some scholars believe that the minerals and bones associated with dragons may have had real health benefits, especially when it came to strengthening bones or treating joint issues. While the idea of using snakes and dragons in medicine might seem odd or even dangerous to us today, ancient Chinese medicine was built on the idea of restoring balance to the body. This balance was believed to affect everything from physical health to mental clarity and spiritual well-being. The use of snake venom, animal parts, and symbolic dragon elements was all part of a larger framework of holistic healing that aimed to bring the body, mind, and spirit into harmony. Whether or not these remedies worked as intended is still up for debate. But it's clear that they were an integral part of one of the oldest and most enduring medical traditions in the world. Now, let's take a detour into the mystical and mysterious world of medieval Europe, where magic, herbs, and the occult often blurred the lines between healing and harm. Imagine yourself in a darkened forest, the air thick with the scent of wild herbs. The moonlight filters through the trees as you meet with a local wise woman, a healer whose knowledge of plants and potions is revered by some and feared by others. In medieval Europe, healing wasn't always seen as a scientific endeavor. Instead, it was often interwoven with witchcraft, superstition, and spiritual beliefs. But how much of this witchcraft was actually effective? Was it real healing? Or was it just a product of fear and folklore? In medieval Europe, the term witch was often applied to women who were knowledgeable in herbal medicine and healing practices. However, these women were not always practicing what we'd consider witchcraft today. Many were simply knowledgeable in the use of plants, herbs, and natural remedies to treat ailments like headaches, fever, or wounds. But because their knowledge was considered outside the traditional realm of male-dominated medicine, these healers often found themselves at odds with the church and the authorities. One of the most famous herbal remedies associated with medieval witchcraft was the use of belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade. While it's true that belladonna is highly toxic, It was also used in small doses as a powerful sedative. In fact, it was an ingredient in many ancient ointments and potions, including those used by witches in their supposed flying salves. These ointments were believed to allow witches to fly or commune with spirits. Today, we know that belladonna contains atropine, a chemical that can dilate the pupils, increase heart rate, and cause hallucinations in larger doses. In the medieval era, however, the plant's real medicinal properties were not well understood, and its use was often a dangerous gamble. Historians still argue whether medieval witchcraft was a form of medical healing or whether it was rooted in superstition. Some scholars argue that the women accused of witchcraft were simply skilled herbalists, and their knowledge of plants and natural remedies was misunderstood or deliberately distorted by those in power. Others suggest that some of the practices associated with witchcraft may have had real medicinal value, albeit mixed with magical beliefs. For instance, many of the so-called witches were knowledgeable about the medicinal uses of herbs like mugwort, sage, and thyme, plants that we now know have legitimate therapeutic properties. One particularly interesting aspect of medieval witchcraft was its connection to the crafting of potions. These potions often contained a combination of herbs, oils, and sometimes animal parts, all of which were believed to have mystical properties. While some of these concoctions were harmless, simply soothing teas or salves for minor ailments, others were much more dangerous. In some cases, potions were meant to induce hallucinations, to protect from evil spirits, or to promote fertility. But whether or not these potions actually worked in the ways they were intended, the belief in their power was central to the practice of medieval healing. Some historians suggest that the widespread fear of witches in medieval Europe was a product of the times, a period when the church held immense power, and any knowledge that fell outside the church's teachings was often seen as dangerous. The church viewed the knowledge of herbal medicine as something associated with the devil, which led to the persecution of many healers who were deemed witches. Between the 15th and 18th centuries, thousands of women across Europe were accused of witchcraft, many of them simply for practicing folk medicine. But was all of this really witchcraft? Historians still debate whether the women accused of witchcraft were simply herbalists, or whether they truly practiced magic. Some suggest that the label of witch was used to silence women who held power or influence in their communities, while others believe that many of these women did indeed engage in magical practices alongside their healing work. Either way, it's clear that medieval medicine was far more than just a scientific pursuit. It was a blend of the mystical and the practical, where magic and medicine often went hand in hand. Interestingly, some of the practices associated with medieval witchcraft have resurfaced in modern herbalism. While we may not be using belladonna or flying ointments today, many of the herbs used by witches in the past are now recognized for their therapeutic benefits. Lavender, sage, and mugwort, once considered magical plants, are now commonly used in aromatherapy and other healing practices. It seems that despite the fear and superstition surrounding witchcraft, some of the healing practices of medieval witches have endured through the centuries. Sweet dreams. Sweet dreams.